And the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier, there was a discussion in connection with this bill as to the enforcement of by the FINRA and by the SEC, and the fact the SEC is examining only about 9% of the companies, where FINRA is examining a great many more. This amendment, I think, would ensure more coverage and more examinations. Last December, we learned that Bernie Madoff had perpetrated the largest financial scam in history, a $65 billion Ponzi scheme, which defrauded nonprofits, universities, pension funds, and wiped out the savings of thousands of investors. Mr. Madoff had a fiduciary duty to his customers and violated all of its tenets. During the committee's 2 Madoff hearings, we learned, and the SEC Inspector General confirmed, that the commission was handed this case on a silver platter and failed to use resources at their disposal appropriately. We also learned that regulatory gaps existed between the oversight of broker-dealers and investment advisors, and this gap, which exists today, is unacceptable. The Investor Protection Act seeks to apply a fiduciary standard of care for all investment professionals that provide investment advice to their clients, but the bill does nothing to enhance the oversight of that standard. In fact, I think that's a problem we've had for the past few years. We have had regulations, we've not had enforcement. The fiduciary standard must be vigorously examined and enforced, and yet the SEC informs us that only 9% of investment advisors will be examined this year and next year. If broker-dealers and investment advisors are going to live under the same standard of care, then they both must be examined to ensure compliance with this standard. We also learned from our Madoff hearings that the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, or FINRA, inspected Mr. Madoff's broker-dealer, which supported his market-making and proprietary trading operations, at least every other year beginning in 1989. But because of FINRA's jurisdiction is limited to broker-dealers, it had no authority to inspect Madoff's investment advisory business. In 2008, and these figures I think are pretty telling, at least 55% of broker-dealers were inspected by FINRA, while only 9% of over 11,000 federally registered investment advisors will be examined in 2009 and 2010, according to the SEC's own figures. As we all know, Mr. Madoff's firm was never subjected to any such examination. This amendment would close this regulatory gap and ensure real investor protection. The amendment would allow registered securities associations, such as the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, to examine the investment advisory activities of firms that are duly registered as both broker-dealers and investment advisors. It is a narrow and targeted approach to solve a real problem. The amendment would not authorize FINRA to go into any firm that it is not already examining. It would simply extend FINRA's authority to examine both sides of the business. They didn't have that authority with Madoff. Had they had that authority, I think there was real probability they would have discovered the conduct. Giving FINRA this authority at duly registered firms such as Madoff's makes sense, given how these two business lines often work together, especially in those firms where they're housed in the same legal entity. There are over 900 firms that are duly registered, operating broker-dealer and investment advisor businesses in the same legal entity. Just over 500 of those firms have investment advisors that are federally registered. One set of eyes looking at both sides of the business would dramatically increase the ability to identify fraud and red flags that could indicate problems within the business. This is a common sense amendment that does not overly burden the SEC. As the chairman said, we've given them additional duties. This actually would, I think, shift some of those duties to FINRA, which is willing to undertake them. It does not spend any additional taxpayer dollars, and it would greatly improve the oversight of our capital markets. I encourage my colleagues to support this amendment and yield back the balance of my time.
Why